This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we have some bombshell news here as it relates to a court shakeup in a state Supreme Court. Can you explain what that news is?
Yeah, this is really big news. One of the most conservative justices on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and I don't just mean ideologically conservative, but I mean like conservative politically, someone who cares a lot about, for example, making sure that Republicans win elections, has announced that she is not going to seek re-election for another term on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. That court right now is 4 liberals, 3 conservatives. One of those 3 is Rebecca Bradley, the woman we're talking about, and her term is up in 2026. So this will create an open seat opportunity in the midterm elections on what is right now a closely divided and very, very sharply ideologically divided state Supreme Court. And if liberals are able to succeed in winning that, it would then be a 5-2 court, which would frankly transform that court in incredibly dramatic ways.
What kind of a member of the court, what kind of a state Supreme Court justice has she been specifically? Like what kind of person is being lost by virtue of this resignation?
All right, let me just read to you what it is she said in her statement, where she announced she's not going to seek re-election in 2026. Quote, "I will not seek re-election to the Wisconsin Supreme Court because I believe the best path for me to rebuild the conservative movement and fight for liberty is not as a minority member of the court." She went on to warn that the court is controlled by judicial activists. Quote, "And Wisconsin has seen only the beginning of what is an alarming shift from thoughtful, principled judicial service towards bitter partisanship, personal attacks, and political gamesmanship that has no place in the court. The conservative movement needs to take stock of its failures, identify the problem, and fix it." So, I mean, to be honest with you, you don't see a lot of judges or justices.
I was going to say, doesn't sound doesn't sound very judicious, like judicially neutral.
Yeah, it's not judicially neutral language, but you don't have a lot of judges or justices who think that their role is to, quote, rebuild the conservative movement.
Yeah.
I mean, presumably judges' roles are to rule on the law and the facts of cases, but that is clearly not what Justice Bradley thinks her role is.
Well, the irony of that is that in that same statement, she decries the activist judges who are on the court, while then saying that her role in all of this is to help build up conservative dogma in this country.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, look, if you go back and you look at prior decisions on that court, both when it was a 4-3 conservative court and since it has been a 4-3 liberal court, and you look at what she has written, it is some of the most intemperate, non-judicious opinions that you could imagine. I mean, the opinions she has signed on to have really been extraordinary. And just as a historical matter, I was fortunate enough to represent President Biden in the post-election against Donald Trump in 2020. And the closest state we came to actually having a court overturn the results of a free and fair election was in Wisconsin. It was a 4-3 conservative court at the time, and one of the other conservatives who is sort of more moderate, at least in temperament, sided with the liberals and prevented it. But, again, if you go back and read what the dissenting opinions there were that she signed on to, it's hair-raising. I mean, it's just extraordinary that she would have been willing to overturn the will of the voters of that state in service of Donald Trump.
Why is it so important in a state like Wisconsin, but also other states, that we pay attention to these Supreme Court, to the makeup of the bench on their state Supreme Courts? Like what could be? I mean, I know that you spoke about the impacts on stealing the election, but what could that look like, not just in Wisconsin, but other states?
Yeah, so look, this is a good opportunity for me to tell everyone to make sure you are subscribed to this YouTube channel and also specifically to ring the bell, because Brian and I talk about this issue of state Supreme Courts all the time, and I want to make sure you don't miss out as developments come up in the future. But Brian, to answer your question, as I said, you and I have talked about this in the context, for example, of North Carolina, where the North Carolina Supreme Court, when it was Democratic controlled, and that's a state that has partisan elections for state Supreme Court, they banned partisan gerrymandering. And you had, for one go-round, a very fair map in the state of North Carolina, fair congressional map. And then Republicans took control of that court and they erased all those gains. They erased all of that law. They also, by the way, erased voting rights gains that had been gained through the courts, striking down really bad voter suppression laws, and those gains were all lost. And, you can look at courts like the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, where there has been this back and forth over, undated mail-in ballots, misdated mail-in ballots where the envelopes aren't sealed, mail-in ballots where there's no inner envelope, right? All of the mishigash there, all of those cases have wound up going to the state Supreme Court, and that is also a very closely divided ideological court. It is technically more democratic, but the justices line up more centrist than they do on some other courts, and they're having elections. So, I could go on and on. The Maine Supreme Court, my law firm and I just won a victory there on a ballot initiative question. The California Supreme Court, which, as you and I did a video recently, humiliated the Republicans party twice in trying to prevent Gavin Newsom's ballot issue from being on the ballot. These state Supreme Court elections are incredibly impactful for democracy, and everyone needs to pay attention to them.
And you have been covering them relentlessly, even despite the fact that virtually nobody else, especially in mainstream media, but virtually nobody else is covering these races, which, to your exact point, could not be more crucial right now. So for those who are looking to stay on top of this kind of important news, please sign up for Democracy Docket. It's Mark's news outlet that he focuses on everything voting and elections. It is a resource that I use on a daily basis. If you're not yet signed up and want to cover the news, if you want to follow the news, this is the outlet you need to subscribe to. So I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Mark, we also got news similarly that Joni Ernst may be considering not running for re-election as well in 2026. So this is another Midwestern state where Republicans have generally done very well, where we have these incumbents who are opting to drop out rather than face the voters in this election cycle. And so what was your reaction to the news that Joni Ernst herself, an incumbent senator in this state, might be looking to drop out in light of the fact that we just saw yet another special election in that state where Caitlin Dray won by 10 points in her latest race to a seat in the state legislature, despite Trump winning that district by 11 points in 2024. That's like a 21, 22-point swing in just a matter of like 7 months.
Yeah, I think these are not disconnected. I think they're, by the way, not disconnected from the panic we see out of the White House and the efforts to gerrymander maps.
Yeah.
The fact is that 2026 is going to be a catastrophically bad year for Republicans who are on the ballot. And that doesn't matter whether you are a state Supreme Court justice who wants to lead a conservative movement in Wisconsin, or you are a senator from Iowa who suggested that people shouldn't worry because everyone's going to die anyway sometime, or you are a Republican member of Congress or senator who has had to vote over and over again for bills to cut the health care for your citizens, right? The fact is, this is going to be a very bad election for them. And so some of them are just going to get out, right? I mean, we could also add to that list, by the way, Tom Tillis in North Carolina, who decided not to run. And on the positive side, you could look at some of the recruiting wins that Democrats have had, like Sherrod Brown deciding to run again in Ohio. Roy Cooper deciding to run in North Carolina. And so, when you look at this more broadly than just one state Supreme Court justice saying she's not going to run, what you see is over the horizon a Democratic wave. And so what is the reaction of that? Republicans could say the reaction to that is to moderate their policies, maybe, for example, work with Democrats to undo some of the healthcare cuts. But they're not going to do that, right? They are in too deep with Donald Trump. They are in too deep with the MAGA movement. And so instead, they're trying to figure out how to rig the rules of voting and how to subvert elections. And that is what we are seeing, right? We're seeing that in what's going on with Texas redistricting in Florida and Missouri and Indiana and elsewhere. But it's also what we're seeing in the voter suppression laws that are being enacted by Republican state legislatures that my law firm and I challenge in court, and also in Donald Trump's other actions, his effort to take over federal elections, to say he wants to ban mail-in voting, to say that he thinks he can to be in charge of counting and tabulating elections, to the effort of Republicans to put election deniers on the Fulton County Board in Georgia, right? All of these things go together. One is a individualized decision made by candidates about whether or not they think they can win, which I think is what motivated Bradley in this instance. But the other is a more systemic Republican reaction, which is to try to make it harder for people like you who are watching this video to vote and easier for Republicans to cheat.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I do know that we often hear people say, oh, like Trump's sending the military into Washington, D.C. That's a distraction from the fact that he has enacted an agenda where they're looking to strip healthcare away from 17 million Americans and he's tanking the economy. And the reality is that it's not a distraction. One is born out of the other.
That's right.
There is a reason Trump is making all of these extrajudicial moves, like sending the military in and forcing these map redraws and trying to get a mid-cycle census and trying to strike down Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. All of this is because, not in spite of, but because he knows his agenda is too unpopular to win with. And so now comes the point where they're imposing this unpopular agenda on people that they need to just scientifically engineer their wins and usurp power by extrajudicial means so that they don't have to face the voters and that this election is not a referendum on the actual agenda that they're putting forward. So it's not a distraction. It is the result of Trump's actions, of this MAGA Republican Party's obsequious actions toward Donald Trump. Again, I know that folks who are watching this right now, if you are looking to support the invaluable work that Mark is doing, not just in the media, which is, running one of the most ascendant and successful independent media outlets and publications that there is right now, which is Democracy Docket, not just in the media, but also in the courts. The best way to show some support for the work he's doing is to subscribe to Democracy Docket. So I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. If you are not yet subscribed, do yourself a favor and subscribe. You will not regret it. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.